noting that the end of The Dark Knight and in turn The Dark Knight Rises and Watchmen were all built on the premise of something explicitly false that was used for a supposedly good reason.
Not to interrupt you, but I think we should state what we're arguing about first. I think not to interrupt your tangent, but I think we should at least state that today's discussion is going to be about whether or not it is correct or right or just to censor or suppress fake news.
And the fraternities just here to monitor.
Well,
But
yeah.
it's used to, I don't know what example, cite my and obviously we're seeing this today with peaceful or fake news that used to be
Here comes
both
Mr.
violence
Ford.
and that aspect.
Well, I think that you run into the issue of fake news that's used to promote violence like that isn't fake news anymore. It's considered it's unprotected speech because it's incitement to violence. Right? I think we're talking specifically about things that are false on the internet. Right? So without moral judgment or without the idea that some of these could incite violence, because once again, lies can be used to also stop violence. You know. So
Like with Watchmen.
yes.
And I would like to see greater penalties for libel and slander. I think that if you can prove it, I think that
It's worth noting that, why do people have false information on their news in the first place? I heard part of the reason is that news is a business, and they have to, be the first to give the information before anyone else does, and sometimes that means having to give the information before they have all of the accurate details out, and so they end up presenting it less than accurately, like not intentionally. But regardless of how intentionally it's done, it's still bad.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't intentionally do that.
Hold up. Yeah, but then what about people like me who intentionally spread false information?
You're fine. You're just fine.
Well,
No, I know what you're saying.
right,
It's,
like, right, I'll make jokes about Kevin Spacey,
Yeah.
and stuff like that that are absolutely libel, But I don't think that I should be censored for that. I have a lot of fun doing things like that on the internet.
Is there libel on it? There's obviously people saying anything they want on the internet, right? You don't see a lot of lawsuits people turning around saying you can't say that.
You do see some.
Do you?
Yes, yeah. There's a case against Encyclopedia Dramatica right now by I can't remember the guy's name.
I remember.
Its court date is like sometime next month.
I remember my dad, he was really not a fan of Trump. The way he said it is, Hillary Clinton may be a liar, but Trump is worse than a liar. He's a bullshitter. The liars actually care about the truth. They care about it enough for you to not know it. But bullshitters, they will just say whatever they think people might buy as a truth, regardless of any factual basis. They don't even care if it's true or not. Although I forgot what my point was.
Well, I guess my biggest argument for why we shouldn't suppress so-called fake news is that it's so-called fake news, right? That the minute you start encouraging people to censor any kind of speech, absolutely some true information is going to get cut. It's just going to happen. Somebody might say something that's true, but they don't have either the information to back it up, or the information that they use to back it up isn't liked by the people in charge, and so their speech gets censored. And so, there's no way to perfectly censor only false information. You're gonna get people.
Funny thing about that, in 1930s Germany, there was actually a number of laws in place that made it significantly harder for Hitler to rise to power and to spread propaganda. But when he eventually did rise up to power, he used those laws that were already in place to censor all of his dissenters, completely legally. what was being used to suppress the bad parts eventually got used to suppress the good parts instead. So the censorship it can very much be abused.
And I mean, like, look, Scott Blockers writes twice a day. Alex Jones spews absolute garbage, but the most famous meme he's known for, they're putting chemicals in the water that are turning the freaking frogs gay. That's a true statement. Like, that's actually, there was a study done that showed that there was a chemical in pesticides that was turning frogs from Africa. And then, okay, so it wasn't a lie, but that absolutely would get caught under the net of fake news because it would likely be done based on previous statements. And if 95% of what Alex Jones says is wrong, but then 5% of it is true and should be brought to attention, then what are you going to do when the government says, "Oh, Alex Jones doesn't get to use Twitter anymore"?
Well, I don't like the idea that some news agencies knowingly spread false information to influence results. That could be election results and everything. Because I think that, from my point of view, I think that they were pressing the fact that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and they were pushing it so much that they were demoralizing many Trump supporters. And trying to just so that they would stay home. And when that ultimately wasn't the case, it's like, okay, well, where did our credibility go? Well,
And they're claiming the winners after like 25 or 10% vote.
Yeah.
They're wrong.
I mean, 1,000 people have voted in Wisconsin. That doesn't mean anything.
That's what I was talking about earlier about news trying to be the first to spread the information, regardless of how much of the accurate information they had at that time.
Well, they do. The news does have an incentive to make stories. That's how they get advertised. And I don't know if Britain does it any better because I think the BBC isn't that government owned for the most part.
Yes, it is. It's not even for the most part. The BBC is a government-owned television station.
Sure. But then they have their own.
The populace to use
Then they have their own incentives to maintain as much money that they're getting.
That's what really is it's propaganda.
First superhero types is
But if you
literally that. It's Go Kart. There's
propaganda, there's a means to that end. Even if it's just
fights of Go Kart versus
Still, you
The
can't
audience
censor
is
propaganda.
is fake.
Is fake. Just like I wouldn't say that CNN should be censored for using poor statisticians to determine the winner of the election or something like that. You also can't say then that we have to censor propaganda because then you're still, what is propaganda? How do you define it? Is it just, information that supports my political enemies? Because if that's the case, then you run into very dangerous territory already. Because there isn't enough of a distinction between what is true news and what is fake news because ultimately it comes down to opinion. I could say, well, there's enough information that the Mandalay Bay shooting had a second shooter or something like that, right? And yeah, the mainstream media doesn't think that that's the case, but are you going to really be able to censor me for spreading that information or spreading my thoughts on that information?
What do you
I'd
think
like
about?
to state that I don't think it was a second shooter.
There was a second shooter, but it was the police officer in the hotel room.
Yeah.
But that was an accidental.
What is, are you? Would you? I'm kind of a little late waiting for the case of it. Would you all think that it could be equally bad? If you think it's bad at all, but what I'm really getting at is for the government not to pass laws to censor it, but to exert pressure, like if people in high places exert pressure on Mark Zuckerberg, which really is happening when they say you got to get your act together.
It's censorship in spirit, not in form.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
ultimately, the First Amendment needs to be concerned primarily with the spirit of things more than with,
Oh,
the law.
interesting.
ultimately, the founders couldn't have accounted for specifics, so you have to take the Constitution based on spirit more than on literal. Because, literally, the First Amendment doesn't cover internet or telephone. It just doesn't, right?
So
But
it's giving
the spirit of it
that-
does,
that
because
protection
you know
is almost
the right to speak your mind
But the fake
needs to
news
cover
back
everything.
forward.
Do you
Otherwise,
think it's different? I'm just throwing a few things out, and then I'll be quiet. But you think it's different? What if it was the case that so the Russians are running political ads in the United States for their self-interest? So they made it look like there was this guy who loves America and he was a veteran and all these good things, but really he was a bot that was just being used. He had a fake identity. Is that different because they're not American citizens? Or, in
The
other
internet-
words, should that be called out?
the internet is an international forum.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you can't say, just because this person is in Russia, we can censor. That's rights are universal. So, an immigrant who hasn't become a citizen still has First Amendment rights to speak. So, just because someone's in a different country, even if their motives may not be good, we don't have the right to tell them they
But
can't
our
speak.
free speech right doesn't extend to China.
It
I mean-
doesn't, but it does extend to a Chinese person wanting to speak in America.
Does it? Oh, see, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't
It-
know.
It does.
Even if they're in China.
Well, while they're in China, we can't punish them for speaking. China
No,
can
but
punish them for
can
speaking.
we?
China will.
Yeah, China will punish them for speaking, but we won't, and we shouldn't.
But you don't think it would be legitimate for Zuckerberg to set up the algorithm on Facebook so that Russians couldn't run political ads?
Yeah, because he's clearly.
It's not clear to me though. Now, I
Okay,
don't mean to
so
be
not,
argumentative.
I guess
Well,
not
no,
to
but
not to be.
that he's violating their free speech right. But that if it's a different country, those free speech rights don't they just protect?
Rights are universal. I mean,
Well, I
do
know
you-
they should be. That's the moral. But, legally,
The
aren't they?
Constitution is only
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
legally they aren't, but
But I see what you mean.
when,
No,
when
no,
we
I
when we
see- I
when we
see.
make the argument, should we do something?
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Basic human
Is it
rights.
right to do something? And it's not right to censor. We should treat rights as if they were universal, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference in America? Is you can have free speech, you just can't yell fire.
In a movie
Yeah.
theater.
Literally, the only thing that is hate speech in America is direct incitement to violence. So if you're at the head of a mob, you aren't allowed to say to burn down a church, right? And if you're in a theater, you can't yell fire so that somebody gets framed. Those are quite literally the only cases where freedom of speech is ever infringed in America.
Well, and of course, like libel.
True.
Yeah.
But libel is a civil case. It's not it's generally, I guess, a civil case between two people. It's not a state case.
In Al Franken's book, and I know there's no offense to those who like him, but he does. This is sort of funny, but he said, "I couldn't write a book called Ted Cruz is a pedophile."
Hold up,
He
hold up,
uses
come on.
that as an example.
Let's be correct here. He couldn't write a book that says Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer.
Oh, interesting. But the reason he got into an argument with Ted Cruz about it, but what the point was that there are some restrictions that would occur on First Amendment that if someone wrote a book about you and it claimed a bunch of false things, probably.
I mean, tabloids build their entire business off of spreading unverified information about
Well, and they get
celebrities.
sued a
I
lot,
mean,
too.
you know how many times Brad and Angelina have broken up according to tabloids?
Yeah, that's right. But it's weird. Public figures, there's a different standard for them
Yeah.
than for if they wrote one about you saying he's breaking up with his girlfriend, then he would have a better shot at you.
Yes.
But so you guys don't think that there would be any problem with Russian involvement in U.S. elections
No, because ultimately,
or any foreign government being in?
So as long as they're abiding by U.S. law, U.S. in international law, I have no problem with it. Because if we did have a problem with it, we could figure it out legislatively. We could
The
pass
problem
law.
with collusion, the big C word is in there, but otherwise you're probably right. If it's just them doing it on their own volition,
even if there's collusion, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, in this previous election, right, the Hillary email scandal was found out by a Russian.
Yeah, let's
Right.
for sake of argument.
That's still a scandal that we wouldn't have known. arguing whether or not that's what lost to the election or something like that. That's still true information that we got from a foreign country. That already proves the benefit of having, all not censoring based on the country of origin.
Yeah, it's weird. No one ever
is
claims that.
censorship inherently unjustified, or is there times when it is actually called for, barring the movie theater and mob example you gave earlier?
Hate speech is free speech, at least in my opinion. Hate speech of any sort is freedom of speech, so long as you're not doing one of
But
the
James
two things.
is asking, is there a case
Because I
where
feel there are times when, even if information is true, it could be irresponsible to spread it. And there's times when people are going so far over the line, they need to be reeled back.
Rare cases.
I think the suppression of truth is always a moral wrong. There is no situation where lying about something is going to help people in the long run.
Lying.
Now, wait, let him get in.
So they've been talking about JFK. Speculation about his murder.
Yes, I know about this.
And so one of the theories, one of the theories is that by murdering JFK, there's some possibility involvement in
I heard something really interesting about this assassination.
No, wait, James. We'll let him just finish his point, then we'll proceed.
So, Oswald, supposedly in Mexico.
Yeah, also.
So some people are speculated that not
And I think
releasing
doubles
this
is
information,
that's
other
what they
police
started
that
doing doubles.
associates were somewhat involved in
Yeah, so when they start doing doubles as the official competitive states.
that could have caused more information.
Because Gen 4 it was doubles. Gen 4 fourth doubles. I don't know Gen
That's just a theory. I don't know. That would be one example of suppressing the truth in order to see. I guess.
To his point, to your point, the guy actually that he talked to was actually literally something like the Department of Assassination. I mean, literally, it was a crazy name, the guy he met. But literally, like he had a sign, like, he talked to me, but like, through prison.
I heard an alternate theory about the assassination of JFK also. I heard that there was indeed an assassination attempt, but it actually failed. The deliberate assassination attempt actually failed, and when the Secret Service were like, what, where'd that shot come from? And one of the Secret Service accidentally discharged, and it was the Secret Service who accidentally killed JFK. But they couldn't reveal that because that would cause all kinds of trouble if they revealed that one of the president's own men accidentally killed him. I mean, that Secret Service guy and all of his family would get lynched. So they felt it was irresponsible to reveal that, and as such, it got buried under a sea of other theories.
So that's still a moral wrong perpetuated, done in service of a greater good, but that's still a moral wrong. The suppression of truth is always a moral wrong. That's a point of principle, right?
But
And
you
so-
wouldn't think, I don't mean to keep doing this, but just one, you wouldn't think like withholding information would be.
Withholding information is still a moral wrong. A lie by omission is still a lie.
But you know how everyone that gets to be president, they say Iraq was a bad idea, and that includes Obama. And then when they get in, it's like they find something else, and then they're more hawkish than when. I mean, that happened with really Trump and Obama.
It's
I mean,
still
don't you think there's some state secrets that it's better we
And
don't
that,
know?
and that reminds me of another example.
Look, 100% transparency is the ideal.
What about if
Yeah.
somebody's being tortured? And like, if somebody's being tortured, do they get the truth out? Do they put their fellow soldiers in harm's way? Do they get the truth out? Or is that morally okay to hold that in?
It's still a moral wrong. It's like
Really?
lying is a moral wrong.
Yeah, I
Or
get
not.
the black and white of it.
You can make the argument that you're doing it to save more lives, but it doesn't change that you're still doing evil to
Another
benefit a good outcome.
example, Tylenol. Like back in the 70s, there was some serial killer or something that was poisoning Tylenol bottles so that when people would try to take this medicine, it would poison them instead. This was only done in like one city, one small area, but it made national news. And since like the whole country knew about it, they're like, oh no, Tylenol is getting poisoned everywhere. We shouldn't buy it anymore. Nearly made Tylenol go completely bankrupt. Yeah. That was true, but it was only true of a very select area, and by sharing it nationally, it caused a lot of trouble to Tylenol that they didn't deserve. That wasn't their fault.
Are you arguing that shouldn't have been released? That information shouldn't have been
My
public
point
information?
is that even sharing true information can sometimes be irresponsible, and you need to be responsible about how you share information, not just in the regard of whether or not it's true.
Maybe that's the key, how you share the information. Don't keep the information.
I'm not making an argument
And
about
then there's the
responsibility.
classic, is it
Responsibility is a personal decision.
no, it's
not
can't.
Not a
Then there's a classic, I think it was Kant example of, what if a murderer comes to your door and demands to know where your spouse is so they can kill them? Should you just tell them exactly the whereabouts of your spouse so they can get murdered? Should you say they're not home right now even if they are? Should you say I refuse to give you that information? What? Because you said even withholding information without lying is still wrong. And in that
moral wrong in that case.
And in that scenario, you would seem if you're taking the absolutist standpoint, then you would just tell the whereabouts of your spouse.
Which is what mine actually thinks you should
Yes,
do.
my point is he seems to be on Kant's side in that regard.
Yeah, look.
Oh no, we'll let Andrew
Sorry,
get it.
So I've got a question. When you say it's a moral, like it's always morally wrong to like lie or get rid of the not tell the full truth, do you mean like morally by like the state's standpoint or like?
I mean, in the spirit of truth, I guess.
Okay.
It's a wrong.
You think we'd have a better society?
Yes.
There
We
was
would have a
more
better-
transparency.
Yes, we would have a better society if there was more transparency.
Okay.
Well, ultimately, the responsibility of the what speaking truth is of course, it's a question of responsibility. But responsibility isn't anyone's decision but your own. You have to say, well, I'm going to do something wrong in order to enact a greater good. Okay, and that's still there's the ends do not.
Constitution and slavery.
I like to think the ends don't justify the means, but occasionally, of course, they do. We don't live in a perfect society. But still, the suppression of truth, in the long run, I think will do more harm than good.
In the previous season of South Park, there was a scheme to have this internet service called Troll Trace that would reveal anyone who looked up internet history. You could just see everything they've ever done online. And you seem to be arguing that this Troll Trace would be justified. And then there's, of course, the argument of the fact that police need search warrants to be able to search your vehicle. I mean, there is a lot of people would argue in favor of privacy, but you seem to be not arguing that. You seem to be arguing kind of the opposite.
No, the argument is, I'm not making an argument against privacy. Privacy is a right that we have as a society as well.
But it is withholding of truth, though.
Yeah, but it's withholding the truth that you've chosen to do. No one has told you have to withhold your house information or your internet history, right? But if you, let's say you released your internet history on the internet, and then decided to, Facebook said, oh, well, we don't want that information out there, and you took it off your profile or something, right? That's wrong. That's still suppression of speech, even if it's inconsequential speech and kind of stupid.
But you're using someone else's program to do that, so they do have a justified saying.
But the argument is that the internet is an odd situation because we have so many businesses that are all geared towards the facilitation of free speech. That things like Facebook have been used just in the past decade to incite revolution in Middle Eastern countries. There are uses for that website that go beyond it being
Without my
profitable business. You know? And so, well, yes, it is effectively private property. It's private property in the same way that like a museum is. In that there are pieces in there that are private property, but
And the
acting as a
airways,
facilitator.
like 102.9 is a private, but yet there are some regulations because the airways belong to all of us.
Ultimately, the internet is a very, very weird situation because we haven't. There was no way to account for it, and so the best way to account for its existence is to say that freedom of speech still needs to apply. That ultimately the suppression of information does more detriment, is more detrimental than the release of information.
Let me ask you what you think. You make some really good points. But you're talking about suppression of information, and I get what you're saying there. You don't want to hold back a lot of truth, very rare. But as somebody who you're also saying like the fake news thing is enjoyable, you like the fake news out there. Is that a hindrance to the truth at all?
Yes, but but to hinder me putting out fake news would hinder the truth more than me putting out fake news. Because when you censor me, you then can use that to justify censoring anyone else you deem as fake news. And whoever holds the standards for what fake news is controls the narrative.
And it can have a really negative effect too. So like, take the person that came up with the first study for like linking flu shots to autism. Like, it was a completely biased study, and other doctors have, other doctors have tried to reenact the same exact study and produce those results, and they have never done such a thing. So, like, it came out that he was just a known fraudulent, and, like, he just wanted to push his own idea, and now look at what it's done to society. Like, yeah, it's completely blown something that's not true way out of
John
proportion.
Stuart Mill, I don't mean to cut you, but
Yeah.
John Stuart Mill, his idea on that, it kind of ties in with Noah's. He says you shouldn't suppress the claims that are false, but prove them false through. But what you're saying is that if there's a time lag, that can cost people their lives.
I don't know. I feel that stuff like that should just be shut down from the get-go, because it's just going to misconstrue people. It's like the idea of flat earthers. Like, they should have just shut that down.
No,
from
because
the
ultimately,
immediate truth.
all right, the minute you set a narrative, you so, I guess the best example with like flat earthers is flat earthers have been disproven, basically.
Yeah,
You know,
but
there's enough
they won't
But
accept it themselves.
So, who cares what they do? Let them speak.
It's not beneficial for the betterment of humanity.
Does all speech have to benefit society? No.
No, but it should.
Yes and no. It doesn't have to.
Ideally.
It should, but it doesn't have to. And to force people to speak only in ways that benefit society is a dangerous idea, because who chooses what benefits society? People who are in power.
Yeah.
And if the people in power get to choose what is good,
Well, I'm saying stuff that's like arguably so, like something like that. That's
I know,
actually
but the minute
factual,
it's a slippery, not to use a logical fallacy, but in this case, it's a fallacy that's relatively apt. That once you put the tools out there, the sword itself incites violence. So once you have the tool to censor something, it's going to get used for evil. And so you can't put the tool out there at all.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the Greek. I can't remember the person who said the sword itself
Ray
incites
did a
violence.
video on that. When there was that
That's a
whole
good one,
issue
though.
about iPhone security, the C2P Gray did a video, and he pretty much said there is no way you can make a security system where only the good guys are able to use it without the bad guys also being able to get in the same way. And I would also like to bring up something that John Oliver brought up, the right to be forgotten. There was an issue with this guy who apparently was unjustly accused of like a sexual assault scandal or something. I don't remember the exact details. And whenever you search his name online, that thing will always pop up. And he actually requested to Google to remove his name from searches so that that wouldn't keep coming back to haunt him from anyone who looks it up. But ironically, because he tried to get it removed, that's all anyone knows about him. All anyone knows is that he's the guy who had the sex scandal that tried to get his name removed from online. It brought up the question, do people have the right to have that information that is true but detrimental to them omitted? Because it causes more harm than good to them. But you were saying, well, maybe on an individualistic scale, but on a grand scale, it's inherently worse to censor truth over suppressing it. But I'm not so sure.
Fine. I'm not saying everybody should agree with me on this.
But
I agree with
ultimately,
parts
when
of
you
it, not
look at like the grand scheme of things, you shouldn't censor anything because the minute you start censoring stuff, it will never stop.
But I do believe that if someone else is using your program for their own speech, they should be able to have a say in that. Like, if you want to go on, form your own website and create your own blog, by all means do so. But if you're using someone else's format to push your agenda, that's on you.
The problem is abuse of power, right? So Facebook and Twitter both have terms of service, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as you obey the terms of service, they should have no right to censor anyone else. Anyone who's obeying the terms of service, they should not be able to shut their stuff down. They do not, because ultimately in society you do not have the right to deny service to someone, unless they violate some sort of rule that you set ahead of.
Like a tenet of your faith, like the gay bakers.
No, because even that, I'm ultimately on the side that they should have baked the cake because ultimately discrimination can lead to serious harm.
That's a very fickle situation that conflicts with my libertarian idea.
I'm about as libertarian as you can get, but let me posit something then for you.
Yeah.
So let's say, all right, so the gay bakers refuse to bake their cake, and they go to every baker in town, and all of them say, we won't bake your cake. Let's do something more important than a cake, because everybody can agree that, you didn't get a baker to bake your cake.
It's still a decent example, though, regardless.
True.
Yeah.
But a more dire example would be, let's say they had run out of gas in a small town, right? And the only gas station nearby doesn't serve gay people. How do they get out of the situation? Because if we allow people to discriminate based on inherent characteristics or even acquired characteristics, you end up with a situation like that.
Don't you have the right
Not that I agree.
It really depends on the location.
Not that I agree with being able to deny someone, but I do believe that it is an individual's personal right to be able to do so.
It should be, but we don't live in a perfect society. It absolutely would be.
But this really happened. Like, I know this funeral home director in Murfreesboro, and he was coming back from Atlanta late at night, and the hotels were all white. This was back in like the 50s. And see, I mean, that's the thing where, is it really more important to say that the business owner has the freedom to deny service to anyone they want to? I mean, more than that the people who would be traveling would have equal rights. I mean, it creates a big social problem if you let them do that.
Like the whole thing about...
Ultimately, in unfettered capitalism, in a perfect society, someone who says, I don't serve
Like-
black people,
like-
would be run out of business because black people stop going to
Like,
white
it's definitely morally wrong. I can agree with that. It's a terrible thing to
The
do,
only
but
reason I think it needs to be legislated is specifically because it leads to death. Because there are situations where it really does harm other people and it violates other people's right to freedom.
and it's definitely like it's definitely just like judging someone by something that they have no control over.
Believe me, if we lived in a society where that stuff like that couldn't happen, I would be all for like discriminating against everyone. Somebody comes in with like a big toe you don't like, tell them no.
Yeah.
Because enough people in Shakespearean time were allowed to say, I don't want Jews to have this job, they got that centuries-long stereotype.
So, in a way, you could make... Oh, I'm sorry.
So, just to confirm your point, because I wasn't paying attention for about half of that. Sorry. I was distracted. But, You're saying that we should have censored the right of people to say, oh, this group of people are this, so that they wouldn't end up with a stereotype about them?
My point is people having the right to suppress them caused a centuries-long problem. Again, another example of an individual case of they did more harm than good.
I mean, I would argue that the idea that Jews are all rich bankers didn't harm. Like, speaking as a Jew, I don't think that really harmed us as a society. I think the sheer number of Jews in Hollywood really kind of shows that actually is some good.
How they majority control Hollywood.
Have you read the Shakespearean play Merchants of Venice?
Yes, I have read the Shakespearean play Merchants of Venice, and I don't have any problem with the idea that someone has the right to portray Jews however they want. You're allowed to portray anybody how you want to.
No, my point is it was a reflection of the society at the time where Jews weren't allowed to hold any job other than money lending.
But that's not about there's not fake news there, right? There's no lie there. There's other oppression, but it's not suppression of free speech.
I just have to say this, that it's just so weird because we're just starting this in ethics, but John Stuart Mill, he equates free speech with the ability to live the lifestyle you want freely too. So it's funny, he sees them, but it's weird how these.
But as long as it doesn't conflict with someone else.
That's right. Yeah, as long as it doesn't genuinely harm someone else. So, but I mean, that's interesting that it's how those can butt heads every now and then. That but anyway.
I just in the news agencies we talk about this one's biased. I think that's perfectly fine so long as they're privately. The BBC is another thing because that's a government entity. Exactly. Right, but if CNN wants to push their narrative, I guess I'm okay with that because I have every right not to watch.
Yeah. But the BBC isn't really. I mean, I don't want to take this on topic, but it's
so the way it works in England, is if you own a television, you have to pay taxes to the government for the right to own a TV license, is what they call it. And all of the money that they get from the TV licenses gets funneled into the BBC, the British Broadcasting Centre. Yeah, they have an actual state-funded news organization that not only is it state-funded, but it also runs advertisements on it.
It's pretty honest.
It is. Yeah, it's
because they have to be. They have to be. They have to present both arguments because if it's a state-sponsored thing, you have
Which that's awesome. That's a great idea.
Well, the problem is that the BBC recently is not showing both sides.
Yeah.
During the last election, they suppressed Tory.
There is bias for the BBC because I mean you would have a free market person come,
there's an actual issue of free speech in
say
England
that, or MP rather.
Unfortunately, we're not talking about that.
I feel that's a major issue with us too. So like perfect example is like 2012 when Gary Johnson was running. Like he had an interview on Fox News and he started saying something they didn't like, and they're just like, that ends this interview, and they just cut him short of his entire
speech. They're a private business, whereas the BBC is state-run, so it's state. It has more of a duty to show both sides of an issue than CNN does.
I don't know. I see an issue with it when you have that much mass appeal to people and you're able to push your agenda out to absolutely
I can see that
everyone.
issue, but from like a libertarian standpoint, right? People have the right to show
And
the only reason I'm on the side of you have to bake the gay cake is specifically because if you let them discriminate, you have to let everyone discriminate. So if everybody is allowed to discriminate, you can just say, hey, this town doesn't serve Jews.
Yeah.
So I'd rock him up in there and be like, hey, I'd like to buy some gas. My car's out of gas. And they'll be like, no, congratulations. You get to starve to death here.
Yeah, that would be pretty fun.
That's the situation that can lead to. And so that's literally the only reason why I'm like, okay, you gotta make it.
It makes sense why. Yeah.
You don't have to like baking the cake. You don't have to be nice about baking the cake. You can bake the cake.
Just bake the
You just have to present them with a cake. You know.
I think there's a courtesy that you extend to the royal family. But.
So, do you guys think that even though America has like freedom of speech and stuff, do you guys think that other nations have a different should have a different view on fake news? Because
by all they have their right to it
on an entirely universal basis.
My situation is that the Chinese government can censor their people, but it's not right. It's not correct.
It's not working.
Ultimately, it's not working.
The thing about it, they don't even know about.
allowing censorship will cause all kinds of problem, as you said. Allowing it to be completely uncensored also causes a lot of problems.
But the problem is that uncensored free speech causes significantly less problems than censorship.
Yeah.
Like, just speaking ultimately, all right. So if we have uncensored free speech, the worst that the worst that can happen is a lie gets perpetuated and it leads to the election of somebody who's not right.
A lie could get perpetuated so much that no one knows the truth anymore.
But because free speech is unfettered, the truth can still get out, and you can still work to promote that truth. Whereas if we have censorship and a lie gets promoted through that censorship, you can't get the truth out.
We have the freedom to look at whatever information we want to, as opposed to take a country like North Korea. They are fed all of the information that the government only wants them to know of, whereas we are able to. I can open up Google search right now, and I can find information on whatever I want to.
Hey, you want to find information about why the Earth is flat? You can do that. I'm not going to say it's right information, correct information, but
you are capable of doing the research yourself and creating your own answer and your own opinion.
The problem with censoring free speech is that it tacitly censors thought, right?
Yeah.
If you can't articulate your 1984 goes into Ben detail about this idea that if you can't articulate an idea, you can't bring that about, right? So if there's no word for revolution in your language, you can't have a revolution. It just won't happen. And so when you start censoring combinations of words, you start censoring words themselves.
It's great small. Obviously, good question. I just think it's weird the fact that it goes from YouTube access.
There's no way the government can, other than stop pressuring Twitter and Facebook.
I mean,
the best way to go from here is that Twitter needs to stop censoring people who they disagree ideologically with. There have been a number of alt-right leaders who have had their Twitter.
Ben Shapiro.
He's not alt-right.
Not alt-right. He's right.
Shut down. The Twitter account shut down, not for any.
There are things that can be arguably shut down. So, one thing I think about is, Antifa Boston chapter when they went on a live interview and they're talking about assassinating the president and killing him and then taking down the entire U.S. military and killing all the citizens.
That's incitement, which is against the law.
Okay, they have all right to censor something like that.
Even ultimately, and as this is going to sound crazy, but I'm going to say let him speak. Look, I think complete freedom of speech is the goal, even if it ends up hurting people. It doesn't. It's better to have the freedom.
John Stuart Mill actually says writing anything is more like the ability to think it. So he's very lax on that you could write something like that. But if you stood outside the White House yelling those words, Mill says, and this is John Stuart Mill, he says,
I guess there is a significant
difference. No, I'm
difference.
not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying Mill actually
if the interview took place during an Antifa riot, then absolutely you're allowed to say, hey, this is incitement. But if it's one person in Antifa giving an interview in a room with an interviewer, then
because people can choose to choose.
Then it's not
financial
incitement.
or personal or
any of that would count
threat
as
to health.
harm. But if it's just offense, then
that's
he
fine.
doesn't. That's what he thinks.
Well, and the problem with it, with saying that allowing any kind of damage to justify censorship speech is that ultimately we end up with a situation like in Canada where Canada passed Bill C-16 just recently, a couple months ago. I can't remember really the actual date. But the Bill C-16 says effectively that if you call a trans person by the wrong pronoun, you can be fined and jailed.
But how are you supposed to know?
Yeah, the trans person has to inform you. The trans person has to inform you, and if you do it,
Well, then that makes sense.
No, because that's censoring attitude.
I used to have a trans friend who would get offended by me using gender-neutral pronouns.
Look, the way I see it is that that's still wrong. Even though, it's
anybody what you want to
it's kind of a dick move to call a trans woman he, like it's her.
Intentionally.
But how do you define intentionally?
But that's just offensive.
Yeah.
a crime is a crime whether or not you did it intentionally, right? That's why manslaughter is a thing. It's still illegal to kill someone, even if you do it on accident. So, the fact that calling a trans person the wrong pronoun is illegal means that it's illegal whether or not you meant to do it.
Yeah. So do you think there's any way we could, censor certain things without getting, going too far
You
with
have
it?
to be extremely strict, and it would have to be very specific. You can't throw the reason we have the best example of yelling fire under credit or direct incitement, right? Is because that means that someone has to be at the head of an actual mob of people attacking rioting effectively in order for it to be incitement, right? It's why Richard Spencer can stand up on a podium and say, "Oh, I think all Jews should be killed," right? Because he's not inciting anything when he's standing on a podium.
It's like on the college campus, like a lot of people are getting upset about people who they don't think, like people who have past histories of inciting rioting or have caused other people to do something illegal. People don't want them to be speaking at their public university or whatever. So what's your thought on that?
I let them speak. I don't agree with censoring anybody.
And
whether or
also,
not
if
I
you're
agree with
writing it into law, you have to get really specific, and not only that, you have to expect the future.
Yeah.
And you can't really plan for the future. You don't know how society is going to change, how words or dialogue or the English language is going to change. It's not something you can properly plan for. So, and it's like a similar argument to the right to bear arms. You don't know the context that they wrote it in because
we actually have a relatively good idea of the context.
A relative idea, but
of it was.
you know what? They weren't capable of predicting the
True.
future or
Just
anything
like with
like
the First
that.
Amendment, they weren't able to predict assault weapons, just like they weren't able to predict.
And
the
they
internet.
weren't able to predict the happening of
Don't you
Facebook
think
or
that
anything
they
like
would have
that.
not liked people being fired for posts, though? I mean, this just bothers me that someone works at a bank and they complain on social media about a bunch of dummies were there today, and then they get fired. To me, that
That's
seems
wrong.
like it just.
It's still censorship.
I mean, I understand the bank.
It's
doesn't like
censorship
it,
in a
but
different
should they-
name, but it's still censorship.
Yeah.
It's,
I
They be able
still-
to say
it's
that they
couched in
don't-
different terms, but
But they
what
also
you do
have
outside
every
of
right to
work-
fire him too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No,
I mean, you kind of do, even though it might be.
because then it's almost like
Because
they're representing the company even when they're not at work.
Oh,
Yeah, representation of something outside of your own, that's different.
Yeah, I don't think it should
But
be. I mean, I think
ultimately, if they say something that's not related to the bank, I'm of the opinion that if, let's say, a bank teller goes home and says, on Facebook, well, a black person came in today and I don't like black people, right? That's,
that's different.
that they shouldn't.
Well, I don't know if you.
I think they're a disgusting person, but they shouldn't be fired. That's still.
Well, unless they openly.
Unless they tell you what
I-
bank they
no,
work
yeah,
at, and
yeah,
they're like,
yeah,
hey,
like
I work
they're-
at this place and I'm super
Well,
racist. Then
Okay,
it's like,
yeah,
okay,
that's
now you're
that's
harming
entirely
racism-
different.
Racism
Like, yeah.
and discrimination are two very different things. Discrimination is an overt act.
Yeah.
So if they openly did something, then yes, I agree that they should be fired. But if it's just their own racism in their own heart, I don't think they should be fired for it.
They'd be fired immediately. I mean, if they wrote that.
Well, the Google
somebody
employee.
wrote
yeah.
for any
What's
company.
his name?
No, I'm not saying whether it's
But,
right
and
or
I,
wrong.
yeah, and
it's
I
just
think
in
I guess the
reality.
bank.
The Google employee was fired for the memo that he posted. I don't agree with it because you don't fire people for their opinions, fire them for actions.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
So,
I hated that Apple employee. I know we're almost done, but that Apple employee got fired. His daughter, I don't know if y'all saw that, but the daughter went to eat lunch with him, and she showed on her webpage how to do the new iPhone 10. This is off the subject, but then the bad thing was that then Apple, there were some codes on there that were, it was like the company version of it.
Oh.
So she leaked some info by accident, and she wasn't supposed to be filming
Well,
in their
that's
cafeteria
intellectual
anymore.
rights that
Yeah,
she
I
doesn't
know.
have she doesn't have possession of.
She never signed a waiver thing saying I will abide by the privacy laws of Apple.
She was just trying
well,
to
and
impress
that's
her
like
friend.
right to privacy stuff. That's another. Right, freedom of speech should only be infringed in the event that it infringes on someone else's other rights.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a right.
Hey, yeah, exactly. Like specifically, so in that case, it was violation of the right to privacy. Right. in the case of Richard Spencer at the head of a mob, inciting like his group of alt-righters to burn down a synagogue, that's the right to private property, right?
Yeah.
But in the case of Richard Spencer on a podium, in front of a crowd of people, saying, well, Jews shouldn't exist and we should kick them all out of the country.
You're actually inciting violence.
Then he's not inciting while he's on the stage.
What
Because
exactly qualifies as the rights of another individual is a little bit of a gray area. Though.
literally the rights laid out in the
Like,
Constitution.
what
It's not much of a gray area there. You have the right to private property, you have the right to privacy, you have the right to bear arms, you have the right, like we actually have a list of human rights that we consider
Because,
important.
a right to employment, for example, if that's not included, then someone by no fault of their own, just by being of the wrong demographic, can be completely blacklisted for no reason.
The right to employment is still a right. That actually is a right that people have.
But then, what if?
Or rather, it's not explicitly the right to employment. It's the right to exist without discrimination by a company or a group.
Because
I don't know specifically.
then when you say employment is a right, then what if about someone who simply doesn't meet up to the qualifications of a particular
Well, I just
job?
walked that back. They don't have the right to employment. They have the right to exist without discrimination, effectively. I don't remember the actual specific where it was laid out, but it's like you're not
It
allowed
comes
to.
down to like you're not able to perform for whatever reason at a job,
Yeah.
By that, like even if it's not your fault, that's still on you.
Yeah.
Like it's like right now, I might be facing a med board for the army. You know what? I accept that because you know what? If I went to combat and I can't perform, that could be someone else's life.
But if you go back to the bank rates, let's say that there's one teller that's racist, speaking out negatively about. So if their speech racist ideas,
Which makes sense because
they want the rest of the employees to do their job effectively.
That's discrimination.
Yeah, that's discrimination. The minute that it comes into the workplace and starts affecting people, then it's like, okay, you have the right to fire this guy.
Yeah,
But if in theory, if he was perfectly polite to everyone at work, didn't matter your race, gender, sex, whatever, but he would go home and he'd be like, well, I don't like black people very much on Facebook, right? And it never got back to his.
Yeah, it just
his
never
person of
affected
employment.
anyone.
It never affected
Yeah,
anyone.
why
He
is
was
it an
perfectly
issue
polite
then?
to everybody. And then his employer found out, he goes home and he's a bit racist on the internet, or he's racist on the internet, or he hates the Jews, or he's like he's a Holocaust denier. You don't have the right to fire that guy as long as it doesn't affect his work.
Because you can't pass a law against racism. You can pass a law against discrimination.
Yeah, because
The
you
funny thing
you
is,
can.
if you think the employer should have the right to fire at will, why couldn't they fire him for that?
They shouldn't have the right to fire.
Oh, that's interesting. So that even a private employer,
And the reason
well,
they shouldn't have the right to fire at will is that we don't have good unions anymore. If we had decent unions, then okay, businesses can fire well because then the rest of the employees could. But because these days businesses will shut down restaurants that have started to form unions, we're in a situation where the businesses shouldn't have the right to fire everybody. It's if you've hired someone on, you've committed.
but the
to
way it is now,
I do believe in it because it's not something you have. It's not yours. Like you can't. It's someone else's business that they own. They started up, and you're just an employee there.
True, but-
You don't own any aspect of
Your
what's
boss
going
owns
on
you.
there. Yeah, and
but
that.
then shouldn't they
And
be
you know
able
what?
to
If
fire you
you,
if they don't want a racist
Yeah.
there?
Well, yeah,
I
because what if
think
your
that's fair,
racist?
yes.
What if your racist statements? Let's say you're out there, you're very vocal in your racist statements.
And it hurts
You got a following of racist people. Well, now your little bar that you own or your little corner store has just become, after the first a couple months, it was a hangout for 80% of the racists. Now it's got this reputation that all the skinheads hang out and go to that bar. After a couple months, that's affected you big time. I don't want to own this bar anymore. I've got the reputation as a
No.
skinhead bar.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
I
I gotta go. I gotta move my.
Yeah.
My people are.
or fire.
Yeah, someone else has taken it from you and made it theirs essentially. Like, yeah.
The problem that we run into there is that if you give businesses the right to fire everybody, you will end up with you end up with also discrimination, right? Because look, what you're doing there, you're still discriminating. You're just discriminating against people that others don't like.
But that's why we have employment,
No,
and we have anti-discrimination
You know,
laws
like,
when it comes to employment.
Oppression is still oppression, even when it's done to people whom you've declared morally not right. You know, like you can't go around punching Nazis just because you don't like Nazis, because you don't go around punching people. That's not what you do. You know, and so yes, it's unfortunate, but you know you'd have to fire them for a reason that wasn't
There would have to be
their
reasonable
skinheads.
grounds.
Yeah,
And then we
you
have
would
those
have to
laws
have.
in place.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is that you need reasonable grounds to fire people. I'm fine with that. I think the system that we have right now works just fine.
Yeah, like
Hey,
when I
officially,
was
like, if anybody needs to take off, this is
yeah, like when I was a manager at Casey's, like if like this is a right to work state, but employment agencies, they want all of the paperwork, because if that comes back on them, turns into a lawsuit or whatever, they need to know that they did it justfully. Like they can't just be like, oh, hey, I don't like you, you're not hired anymore here. Because that person's going to probably hire a lawyer and come back at you, and you're going to get sued for it.
And
Well, what scares me really is this is kind of like, and this goes back to the thing about unions. You almost wouldn't need the unions to begin with if people weren't so quick. Like, and I don't just mean people here, but it's just like overwhelmingly, if I ask students about it, like in classes, they'll say, "Well, those rights you have from the Constitution they don't apply when you're at work." But that seems like. I know. Well,
rights are
I'm sort
universal.
of with you on
Once
that.
again,
but it seems like they should. That I mean, and it does. Like it's starting to get touchier about like the Second Amendment. That I mean, let's just put it this way: people would now have cases if they went into their workplace if they're carrying something and they got fired for it. So why not?
if you have a concealed carry permit.
It'd be different.
It should apply everywhere. There shouldn't be no guns.
But then it seems like too that then you go back to the free speech thing.
As bad as it sounds, I agree with what you
like,
just said there.
I will say it because I'm okay with looking like a crazy person, but
No, because you can like, okay, so like, for instance, the guy that walked into an airport with a fucking 100-round drum barrel on an AR-15 just to take his daughter to the airport. You are scaring a lot of people.
Yeah,
And
but
you
nobody
shouldn't-
has the right to feel safe, right?
Yeah, but you know
as
what?
long as you don't shoot it,
Yeah,
like,
but these people didn't get asked to be scared that way. They didn't. They weren't.
it's not a
like
right that they have them.
yeah. Well,
you know?
it's not like television where they can tune into a specific channel
That's
that they
true.
want either.
You have a right to be safe.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have
but you
the
don't have the right to feel safe.
yeah, and
So,
you
yes, it's intimidating to have some guy with a big drum barrel magazine standing there. But if he's not shooting anybody and he's not harming anyone, because
yeah,
no,
but
you were spooked a little bit.
but you also don't know the intention of that.
That's
person.
true, but just because you don't know you'll never know the intent of another person until the moment the guy starts
But
shooting.
look,
but
if
he has
that's
the right to
right,
have it there.
if that's right, then surely the person working at Wendy's should be able to show up to the window with a Bernie Sanders T-shirt on.
If it's not the uniform, no.
Well, I know you kind of agree with that, but like most people, I see you're not agreeing.
If
Okay, a button on it.
Well, then,
See, I think it's a technicality if they say, "Oh, no button,"
because
or,
Just yesterday, my friend Tiffany went to McDonald's where she works, dressed up as Wendy, just to be a troll.
Oh, that's funny.
but like ultimately, the if it's against uniform, you aren't allowed to have
But then why not say, well, sorry, airport has a no gun policy, and so there it ends there.
Okay,
There's your
so
Second Amendment right.
A concealed carry license applies so long as the gun stays completely hidden. Nobody knows you have it. That's the ideal of a
And it's
concealed carry
state by
license.
state
Right.
too.
So if your workplace has a uniform that allows you to conceal your weapon effectively, so that your
You can
concealed
have
carry
it.
permit still applies, you should be allowed to carry your weapon.
So I should be allowed a concealed
You
Bernie
sh-
Sanders.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you
Also-
should be able to. Doesn't mean you are.
Yeah,
able to.
really, I know.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, it is true. If
Like,
someone
I
wrote
worked
anything
at,
that even smacked of where someone thought it was
I worked at Red
racist,
Lobster
they'd be
for a
gone.
while. It's
I mean,
t-shirt
that's the
and,
way,
and
that's
jeans.
where we are now.
You wouldn't
You
even be
gotta
able to
be on
conceal carry
Facebook
unless you
or
had like one of
something.
those
Or
really
they
cool,
could,
like
yeah.
in your
That
pants
pull up
holster,
on
right?
the-
But I believe that if I had one of those and I could wear it,
You should be able to.
You
Why
should.
not?
Now, celebrities, anybody
It's your own personal right.
And ultimately, nobody has the right to feel safe. They have the right to be safe. And so,
30 years
you know,
later,
fair
yes,
enough.
it's spooky to have a guy standing outside the airport with a 100-round magazine on his AR-15. But
But
if
you
he
also
doesn't
have to
shoot it,
question why is he doing? Is it necessary?
It's not.
to
Yeah,
do
but
that?
I'm not concerned with the necessity of it. I'm concerned with the legality of it, right? So it should be legal. But yeah, you could be like, wow, dude, you're a little bit spooky over here. Maybe next time don't bring your AR-15 with the big fucking I'm gonna murder everybody in here
Like
magazine.
you're in an airport. There's enough security on there.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.